Welcome back to Wickerson Studios. I thought I would just go back to a little bit of basics. That's makes scripting Grasshopper fun for Rhino, and I'm doing this because I'll be doing a Sunday workshop at KCAI on the 28th, the full moon, Palm Sunday. Passover begins. What's nice about this is I've got it revolving, and I'm going to take off the revolve. We're just going to take a look at this quad sphere. How is that created? How is this simple script running? It's actually very simple, but you can build some interesting geometries, and I've left them in different sections, and you'll see exactly. I'll rebuild it with you from scratch. But what I'm going to do is just throw this through a little animate tool and show you what happens as it builds itself. These are just going through a few iterations, and you can see how it's changing up not only the size and scale of this hole in here, but it's actually redesigning that hole. And so it's just a way to think about, generating geometries that you might normally not have fabricated this way, and certainly not within the surface of a quad sphere. Some of it just goes solid. Some of it's more interesting than others. But you can play with a lot more of these sliders than just this one. I'm showing a sample of it animated through that 36 frames. So if you had it on turntable, you'd be looking at it. I think I can revolve that while it's actually doing that, and I think I can put it back on all four views so you get a sense of the geometries that are being created there. And we'll just build this from scratch, and I'll show you it. We are at count 36. Perfect. So I'll try and show this in all windows. It might be interesting to see in perspective. Let's turn off turntable, because now that one's revolving. Oops. And yeah, I'll just pull that one back in over here, even though it's not really behaving like right view now. It's now behaving like a perspective view. So let's just pull these numbers back and see what happens. So what I did, I've got some interesting geometries there that are being fabricated. So what I thought to do was initially I'm just going to take this off, make a rectangle. Now, I didn't actually think of that first. How I began this script, and as we run through it, green is the parameters and the planes and things that are changeable. Orange is pretty much the script that I wanted to run that's untouchable, or I'd not recommend. And then the tail end is just what can I do with morphing this and slowing it down with a little bit of script using bounding boxes and some of the transformation tools, which are kind of fun. And of course, things slow down to 300 milliseconds, but that's all right, and 8 milliseconds in the end for rendering this in different forms. So what's being built, we'll just go over this quickly, or maybe I'll just do it from scratch. What I thought was, wouldn't it be good to start this script with a randomness? And I thought a populate 2D would be the tool to do that. So I jumped in here, probably in sets, I grabbed this tool, and I put it in here. So that's basically what I built. And then I looked at that and I was like, well, what can I do to that to get some? I don't want to default to this region that's set there. When I go in there and it's set to width 20 and 10, I thought, well, I'll just make my own region. Well, what is a region? The region itself is asking for a rectangle. So I'll go up here and I'll find a curve and I'll go into primitives and I'll say, well, let's build a rectangle. So I brought that out and I put that in there. And if I put that in there, I've got a default plane you'll see initially. Whenever I have something that I'm okay with, I will just extract that parameter. There's our first plane. And of course, you can change that up to any plane and in multiple planes and lists of planes. So this geometry can just blow up just from these nodes that we have going on now. The count, I thought, well, it's a pretty good count to have 100. So I just came in here and I typed for a small script 12. I said, well, let's just take the count to begin with to 12 and see how many points are there. And there they are. Being generated. But then I thought, well, I could run that up to 100. I could deal with looking at 100 points. It's not going to kill me. And then if you see what I did here was I took that same size count and thought, well, relative in size, if I plug that into my X and my Y of my region, that's going to keep things kind of behaving the same. And I don't have a 3-number sliders that actually can work all of these. And now you can see what happens is it blows it out a little bit. And when I change these sliders from 100 all the way down to 30, it kind of relatively spaces things in a decent manner, and things drop off and come on. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, and that's what I was thinking. The radius, I'm not going to worry about curving it because it's not going to work as a populate 2D very well if I start using non-square regions or rectangular regions. But that's enough to start. So what else did I do? And what I did was I always love to go in here and keep an eye on my params and see what's going on. And I'm looking at it, I have one branch with 93 items. But I thought, well, what if I grabbed a list, a sub-list of that? So I went off into lists, and I went over here, and I said, well, I could have used any of these. Dispatch, pick and choose, anything. I could have, what's the one? Culling patterns. I could have done that over here in the sequence tools. But I thought, well, let's just grab the simple one, a sub-list. And looking at it, there's my list of numbers, which had 93, but I want to make a domain. And what's nice is Hover here says you need a domain. It says, right, I can't really point to it, but it's that little icon, that hex icon right beside domain. So I'll go up here, go into Maths, and be like, I know how to create a domain. There we are. Pop a domain in there. Don't have to worry about the wrap. But you'll see that the domain's pretty boring now at 0 and 1. But I can set those domains to numbers that balance between 0 and 100. Which is going to fudge out a little bit because I'm thinking of this number slider up here. So if I've got 93 that I crank up to 100, I'll probably grab that same number slider twice. Not the most, intelligent way to script, because you will have some bugs when you do this, but I don't mind the bugs. Nothing defaults, and I'm just grabbing a range in there. And what I did was I took a list of 100 items and now made it a list of 60 items because that's what's between 15 and 74. So now I've got another list of items that I can kind of decide how much of these I want. You see, I can start editing ones out and I can bring ones back in. And that's going to be a fun way to control the geometries as I move along. Now, I started to deactivate some of these things, but otherwise, let's just keep going with the numbers. And what I then did again was I said, well, let's take these list of points. And it's wonderful to make a center box. So I went into surface, went into primitives, and said, well, there's a pretty cool center box. I think it's like center box right there. Let's build a bunch of these center boxes from these lists. And I did, and they're very tiny. And I was like, well, that's kind of too tiny. So if I grabbed something that was relative in size and scale to that, and I thought another number slider that might work for me, and I'll pull these ones over because those number sliders are going to go in. Compared to that, I want something smaller than the large box. So I just thought, well, let's just do a little count from keeping it lower than 100. Let's do 12. And I thought, well, let's bring that in, just put that into the X. And we'll put that into the Y. Sorry, I'm so far away. Nice thing to do here is to show you what I'm doing. And pull that into the Z. And I think that's what I did. X, Y, Z, there was my center box, and there was my numbers. So now I can put a few boxes on there. If we go back and take a look at everything, of course, we're looking at everything if I do that, so it's probably not a great idea. Let me get rid of these, take the preview off those. And actually, what I'll do is I'll grab all of these and just deactivate, disable. But the problem with that is no, it's all right. Now I can take a look at everything that's actually happening. So I've got my plane, which was initially there. I think I'll go over it here now. I have my region, I have my populate 2D, and I have my smaller list, and I have my boxes that I'm putting on top of there. And those boxes are parametric in size when I want to make them larger or smaller. I can make them touch each other, I can make them not touch each other. But this is controlling some geometries. I said, without thinking too far complex, why don't I, through this, grab another center box and just take one of those list items. So take that list item and decide I want a list item of that list that I put in there, because I love list items, and bring that in, and we'll just choose one. It'll grab the first index, put the bases in. There it is. And I decided, well, I want to extend that domain in a positive negative direction. I don't think I actually needed to do this because I was going to use a negative domain. I was going to do something with it. But because I think of center boxes as domains, I usually go in and create a domain like that. And that domain will run through here. You'll see my box is going to get real small again, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. But I can start to say, let's make that a little bigger. And I did that through amplification, through a multiplication. And I grabbed the numbers. What did I grab? I grabbed what I was using as the size of the original box, 11, so it stays relative to it, times a number, which will be the big size of the domain. And this defaults to 1, but at that point I thought it would be fun to bring in another integer value, and I actually brought in a float so it would run smooth, so I'll just type in 2.9. That gives me a 1 decimal float, and I'll multiply that by that. And now I have a box that I can change scale and have a pretty smooth transition as to what it is, like that. Now that's a much bigger box than the boxes that were here. And now I'm thinking, okay, there's my script running. That's what I actually wanted to make. So there's my group. That makes sense to me. I don't need to see any of that, but I'll leave it on for now because it's kind of fun to see all the stuff that's jazzing up. These are my parameters. So I put those into a group. And I know I can fudge with this. And then what would I do afterwards? And this is kind of postscript, having a little fun with the postscript. So there's all the angles of everything. You can click on each one and see what it was as you ran through the script and understand what it does. But you're left with a series of boxes that are in another series of boxes. And the only thing I did here was my domain's a little big here. You'll notice what I did was I kept Z very small. I didn't throw it through the multiplying factor. So I took my Z And from that 5.3, I put that directly into the Z so it would be flat. And now I see a box that's extended out the top and bottom of this large flat box, all these boxes, that I could do a nice Boolean difference. So that's exactly what I did. I grabbed this node over in editing, a solid, I believe I did a solid difference. And then I took this big box and I erased all these boxes. And I was left with this cool form. And there it is. And there's the geometries I'm starting to make. And that was enough to end. I was happy with that. But I said, well, I do love the quad sphere. And the quad sphere itself is an interesting thing. And what I played with here, and I'll draw out this script. I think what I'll do at this point to save time is just copy all of these nodes and bring them down here and show you exactly what I was doing with it. So this one here, let me just ungroup this, put that one back up there, and think about this. What I did was I'll disconnect this one because we're working with these nodes and I don't have to bring them down and play with them. But I have, and I'll take this node off as well, just disconnect this radius. Be great if you guys, All right, so I'm just going to disconnect this radius to the domain start. And now what I have is this interesting thing that, what did I do with it? I created a quad sphere that was very, very tiny, but I like the quad sphere because it actually has 6 different faces on it. So I grabbed the quad sphere just from solids and primitives. Right there is quad sphere, and I think it's more interesting than the sphere mesh or sphere regular sphere. I'm just going to put these on preview on so we can see those. But I wanted a radius that actually made sense. And the radius I grabbed, I believe, was, let me see which one I went to. I think I followed that back to where my domain start was, and I actually listed that as domain start. So I'm going to grab that little domain start here and pull that into here as the radius. And now you can see what's happening is I have a larger sphere with all of these sides. Those are all the edges. I can use all 6 of them, even though I could just use one if I wanted to. And I set my domain. I didn't really need to put this in here, but once again, I like the U, V, and W domain. It defaults to 0 to 1, and you could change that if you wanted to, which really starts to get funky in the script. But I'll leave that up to you. So you can go into here and try things like, I've reparameterized the surface here, which is key, bringing the faces in and reparametizing them so it'll work from 0 to 1. And you are taking something. I'm taking this surface, which I created, and I am grabbing one of those items, because what's happening is, if you look here, 4 have been produced. 1 is usually the largest one in the script, or 0, number 0. So I've taken this to a default. I'll just type in 0 because I don't want you to mess with that script. That's the 0 index. And I found the centroid of that index here. And that was my point of where I was trying to map it to, use my reference. But that's not what you do with this. So I'm going to erase that one. And you actually take a center box, you take a bounding box around these pieces. Now what you could do is you could do a bounding box, which is a union box, which would take all of the forms. And I guess I might do that. I think I might take this over to and see if I can do this with the union box over here, which is pretty interesting to see what that one did. And I believe if I zoom in, it says union box now. And now I think I can grab all of my list, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to grab all of these with a Control Alt. I'm going to pull that back in to here. Oh, Control Alt is actually seeing where it's located. Pull that back into there. Take this one off and see if that union box works. And you'll see what happens there. It starts to space the pieces over top of all those surfaces and not independently. So not really what I want. I'm going to leave that one in here as where it was, use that as the reference geometry, and map it into those forms, and take that union box back off. And I should be able to, with this revolting factor, this one, choosing item 0, map that one onto this surface. Very interesting what happened, because I've lost what I did. I think I'm going to have to re-plug in these things. Sometimes you have to do this. Take my union box, take my faces, and I'm going to plug back in my geometry, plug back in my faces to my union box, and see if I get it. And I have actually managed to morph and mess this up. So I'm going to go back to where I was, because I liked what I had before. There we go. Sometimes when you start playing with these morphs, you set things in different order. So it's a little jumbly in the end. I'll let you play with the script. I'll have the script over on my GitHub if you want it. I think it's a fun little exercise. It grabs all the forms, and I'll put it back into ghosted or put it back into shaded, and then put this off so you can actually see everything that's involved. And then I'll take all the stuff I did, because I don't want to see it. It's how the render works. I'm going to regroup all this into a group. Sorry it gets a little chaotic, but it's just in my nature. I think you just have to play with it. Give that a second to run with the group, because it takes a second. Grab all these, turn those to preview off, and there you go. You're left with that form again. I've run the script twice. The bottom one is here, kind of generated from that top one. But the point is not to copy exactly. It's just like using tracing paper and drawing pictures. You want to get in here. And even though you can take a look at that, and you can see exactly what you have there as a form, and you can go in there and grab the colored forms. What a nice little shape, and I want to show you the power of going in there and choosing a different size boxes, or as many boxes. You'll start to have more negatives throughout that shape because you're just cutting out a few. So you have to think of like the intricacies of your fabrication process and what you can do. But this is a pretty interesting quad sphere geometry that runs okay fast. And I just wanted to take a little break from C# and Python and realize that node scripting without any skills in GH Python nodes or C# nodes is totally doable. And if you start to just keep chasing this back to the right and realizing you could have had multiple planes that would have played off of this, that would have made it interesting, or other surfaces that have a script that this one plugs into, as long as your profiler's on and this isn't too outrageous in size and scale. You see 12 milliseconds is not bad. 351 maybe is a little large, but that's always what you get with a surface morph. And you've got two shapes here. I'm going to run them both just for fun. I'm going to basically enable them both. Let's go slow our script down by half. I'm going to take this one on preview, and there you go. You have the inner one and the outer one, the same colors, and you can think about this as a, just think if you start dealing in more than two and you start to run these scripts instead of cutting and pasting the two of them, you start to deal with different ranges and series throughout it. So I hope you find that kind of exciting. It's always nice to make a script like that, kind of play off the start again on a lot of things, and see what happens. You've got pretty cool. I'm just going to put on my turntable there. Oops, I just zoomed in. Yeah, it's a nice little exercise, and I didn't want to do that, but I guess I will. Pull that one back over here, and just have fun with the little turntable. Target, and turntable. Get these ones rolling. That one's kind of going away from the top. That one will dance from the side. And there you go. This one's a little jittery. There it goes. You can only get one going at once. Actually, I like the top view. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Not too hard to think about it. Write yourself an interesting script. Write it again, cut and paste it. And I hope you enjoyed that 18 minutes of quad spheres and morphing and Boolean differences.